morning. Dave Hughes on SuperTalk, Mississippi, live in the Element Wealth Studios on MidDays. We've got a busy show today. Got a lot of folks we're going to be talking to and a lot of things to discuss. One of them, of course, the Republican National Convention going on in Milwaukee. And we have, I understand we have shaken up the schedule a little bit because they don't understand that Gerard is there and he's got things to do, so they scheduled the bus at the wrong time. So we're going to talk to Gerard Gibert right now, live from Milwaukee. How you doing this morning, man?
Hey, morning, Dave. You're right. The schedule is a little fluid, and so we're trying to fit everything in, but apologize for having to move it up a little bit. No.
I can't think of a better way to start the show, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, last night was emotional and impactful. Do you think that's a good way to describe it?
Yeah, I do. It was moving. So I tell you what happened, Dave. Sitting in the Mississippi delegation area there. If you've been watching it, I think probably most of our audience has. You see, you're in an arena with the stage on one side of it. It's kind of oval shaped, of course, and then you've got sort of a semicircular shaped area for the delegate seating on the floor. And if you can kind of imagine a 45-degree line from the right side of the stage through the floor there in the back, that's where the Mississippi delegation is seated. That just happens to be where the VIP event took place last night. Little did we know that featured, of course, President Trump, J.D. Vance, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, Byron Donalds, Tucker Carlson. And so about an hour and a half before the president arrived, we noticed that a large amount of security personnel and the media congregating in our area. So they must have obviously known. I mean, literally where I was seated, there was no way for me to get out. If I needed to get out, it would be impossible to navigate through that sea of humanity. And so everybody felt like, yeah, I think the president's coming, although he wasn't, formally scheduled. And then I saw security start to move the people sitting in the spectator seating, not on the floor, but in the spectator seating. That's for guests and alternates. And we're figuring, yeah, something must be going on. So sure enough, that's exactly what happened. And I was standing in my chair, had Commissioner Andy Gibson on one side of me and Congressman Greg Harper on the other. We were standing in our chairs as the president came out of the arena floor from a hallway back there and then climbed the steps, the temporary steps that take you up to the spectator seating, took a seat there, of course, with his newly appointed Vice President J.D. Vance, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, Byron Donalds, Tucker Carlson to the president's right. I literally was about 40 feet away, and I'm snapping photos and recording video. Lee Greenwood joined the band for his iconic tune, of course, and it was just so fun, so neat, so moving, and the president looked a little moved as well, and I'm sure the emotion of what happened over the weekend, of course, and then greeting, I guess, a big mass of people, being in their midst, first time since the assassination attempt on his life. Also, I'm sure folks saw, had a white bandage on his right ear, of course, from the injury from the bullet that struck it. But just incredible. I mean, it's historical. I'm blessed to be present, but little did we know that the Mississippi delegation was going to have the prime seating in the whole dang arena for this event.
Front and center. Sometimes luck just works out the way it's supposed to, doesn't it?
It was unbelievable. I mean, it truly was. And this was after a series of very powerful speeches delivered. And what I noticed, Dave, is a great amount of focus, at least last night, on economic matters. And then some, of course, on the border as well. And those are the two top issues in virtually every poll to the American public. So I think the campaign, the party was wise to focus on that, and just got average people that are experiencing some of the plight of the Biden policy era talk about how it had affected them and their families specifically. One lady talked about losing her husband to a drug overdose. Another one talks about the economy and how brutal it had been on them. They voted for Biden last time and announced they were flipping their vote to President Trump this time. I mean, that's brilliant from a campaign perspective.
Oh, definitely. Now, let me ask you this. Aside from Senator Vance and President Trump and some of the other things that were kind of the marquee events of the evening, if you will, what stands out if you had to pick one of the speeches that was given last night as the top shelf model from the evening, the one that just stands out in your mind? What would you point to? Which one?
I'd have to call it a tie between Representative Byron Donalds of Florida. Of course, he is a close friend of the president. The president, Trump, is a big fan of his. I think he is a rising star in the party. And I'll also have to tell you that Governor Glenn Youngkin, I really enjoyed his remarks. He's a business person, of course, comes from a business background, and talked about the success that they had in the state of Virginia. He's a great spokesperson for his state. I think he, too, has a future, perhaps as a presidential candidate down the line. The good news is our bench is deep, but I would say those two struck me more than any. There was also a lady, the one I just mentioned earlier, the situation, lost her husband to drugs and left her with her small children without a father. And she talked about that and essentially blamed that on the situation at the border. I thought that was very powerful and a great way to make that point.
Well, I want to ask your opinion about one that really kind of grabbed me because from a public speaking perspective, I think he nailed it. Oh, did he command that room? At least that's what it looked like to me. And that was the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, Mark Robinson.
Yeah, he's awesome. He is a great orator. And, of course, he I think, properly makes the point. He's the first black lieutenant governor of that state and soon to be the first governor, as he puts it, of the state. I've always enjoyed his speaking, his remarks. He is excellent. He's very, very common sense. And I just think people want that. They just want a common sense communication. We don't get that out of Joe Biden. We get a bunch of mumbled misinformation is what we get, and distorting of reality. And what we got last night was just a lot of reality.
Well, and you say that, and I thought it was fascinating that while the convention was going on last night, NBC News had their interview with President Biden, and Lester Holt asked him about the comment he made in a call last week saying that it was time to put Trump in the bullseye, and Biden's response was, "I didn't say crosshairs."
Yeah, I know.
And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah, the proper thing for him to do, in my view, would be to apologize for that. I'm not so sure we won't see a little bit of reconciliation in President Trump's speech on Thursday. You know, he said he's completely rewritten it, given what happened to him on Saturday, and he is, you know, now calling for unity. And he says his speech is going to be about unity. And man, if there's one thing this country needs, is to get a leader in the White House that can hopefully unify the American people.
Well, definitely. And I only called that out because the juxtaposition of what we saw at the convention last night, and already some of that message of unity seems to be on display. It was an emotional evening. It was an impactful evening. And at the same time, you had the sitting president not understanding basic English words. And that really drew the comparison to me. It drew the contrast very clearly.
He's like Teflon. Nothing sticks to him.
You know, I really think that a lot of the pundits that were talking after what happened Saturday happened were right when they said, well, Trump just won the election. I think it's his to lose at this point.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they are panicking. They're already starting to attack J.D. Vance, Senator Vance, of course, and they're just dreaming up all kinds of crazy stuff. He's a right-wing extremist, and I mean, I don't even know what that means anymore. They've overused that term so much that it really doesn't have any meaningful, any impact. I think people just yawn when they hear it.
Well, obviously he's a right-wing extremist. He only has two pronouns. You can tell.
Right. Exactly.
It's obvious that there's something wrong with the man, right? Can you hang on for just a minute more, or do you have to go bus catching?
I can hang on. They just sent me a text updating our schedule so I can catch the bus a little later. So I'm in good shape.
Okay. We'll continue talking with Gerard Gibert live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the Republican National Convention on Middays, live in the Element Wealth Studios. Mississippi Middays in the Element Wealth Studios. Dave Hughes here on the phone with us. Gerard Gibert live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the Republican National Convention. A couple of things I want to get your take on, Gerard, and we'll get to the newly nominated vice presidential candidate in a minute because I want to talk about that. But first, I believe it was the first time in history that you had a union leader of that level speak at the Republican National Convention. Give me your thoughts on Shawn Fain and what happened with that.
Yeah, I think it was a good idea to get someone at that high level representing a union organization to speak at a Republican convention, and he cited some statistic about the last time that occurred, if ever. I can't exactly remember. To me, the content, Dave, of his speech was more about promoting unions than it was discussing and proclaiming support for President Trump. I didn't get that out of the message. He didn't just come out full-throated endorse the former president in the upcoming election. Rather, he really did focus on unions and their value, and he accosted many American corporations. And I didn't really think that was appropriate, and I was somewhat angered by it, to be quite honest. So I'm not really sure what the strategy was there. I did note that, for example, he praised UPS because UPS is unionized, but he blasted Amazon because they're not. And he took some shots at some other companies as well. So I thought that was almost anti-conservative, anti-Republican, not consistent with a conservative Republican free market agenda, free enterprise agenda. It just seemed to be in contention with that. I was a bit shocked. I also thought he talked a little long. He got a little long-winded there. So that was my least favorite speaker.
Everything I've seen, he tends to do that. If you give him 5 minutes, you're going to have to pull him off the stage 20 minutes later. That's the way he works. But I will say I think there may be a deeper level strategy that nobody is looking at because, and just like with Amber Rose, a lot of people are blasting that choice to get up there and speak. People of that stripe, people that belong to unions, is the convention about just parroting the same things over and over and over that we always do and always will because they're true and right and just? Or is it about bringing more people into the flock?
Yeah, sure. I think that from a political perspective, of course, you seek broad appeal. You want the tent to expand and be as big as it possibly can be because when you're doing that, you hope you're chalking up votes. And that's what that's all about. Whether or not, sometimes I guess you could also aggravate your base, right? And that could be a problem. I don't think anybody's not going to vote for the president, Trump, because of this Teamsters guy speaking last night. I don't feel like it was that. But I do feel like that the message is in conflict with what we as Republicans believe in. And that's problematic.
It's a bit problematic, but like I said, I see the strategy behind it because this is a 4-day show trying to bring attention in with President Trump already saying he's rewritten his speech to focus on unity. I think this is putting that into place in a more visible way. Like you said, let's expand the tent. We can argue over who sits where once we get them in.
Yeah, you may be right about that. I'm thinking if I'm the Joe Biden campaign witnessing that last night, I mean, that obviously is a very reliable voting bloc for Democrats, that being labor unions. I'm worried if I see that.
Yeah, and, the goal could be just that simple. Let's be honest. Keep the enemy rattled. That's not a bad strategy most of the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Speaking of impactful decisions, I guess you would say, give me your take, give me your thoughts. When I saw the notice that was put out early yesterday afternoon that Doug Burgum had been called and told he was not going to be the pick, I immediately thought of you and said, should I call him and offer support? He's gonna be sad about this.
Right. I did support Doug Burgum as the VP pick, but unfortunately he did not get the nod. I'm not necessarily unhappy with the J.D. Vance. He wasn't my first pick. I think there is. You were talking about strategy. I think there's a strategy to that. I think sort of like expanding the tent when you look at J.D.'s background and personal history. I think that the President Trump believes that could appeal to a lot of the working class folks. I mean, J.D.'s his life story is fascinating. He truly does epitomize the opportunity in America, and he's kind of a model for the American dream. He grew up quite poor. I mean, his book, Hillbilly Elegy, the movie, all tells that story. Goes on to graduate from Ohio State and then Yale Law School, gets involved in Silicon Valley with Peter Thiel's companies, and does quite well. Palantir and PayPal does quite well, just got elected to the U.S. Senate, and now he's a nominee for vice president, 39 years old. I mean, this is what the American dream is all about. So I applaud his selection on that basis.
Well, it's an interesting choice, like you said. There's a lot of strategy going on. That we've talked about this before. You and I have talked about this. President Trump is usually about 18 and a half steps ahead of everybody else.
Yeah. And
there's not a ton of moves he makes that aren't for a reason, even if no one else knows what that reason is yet. So I hate to fall back on this phrase. I think we have to trust the process.
That's right. I think you're right to a great extent, and I think we'd have to agree that you don't get to the level of success that Mr. Trump has enjoyed if you're not sort of seeing around the corner, as is often said in the business world, and obviously he's got a great sense about that. So, and he brings a youthful figure to the ticket as well, and I think there's some strategy associated with that. So I think overall he's a good pick. Of course, I think you could tell that, Dave, by the fact that the left-wing media is just melted down. I mean,
yes.
The way they're just attacking him is just incredible. Of course, I guess no matter who gets selected, that's going to be the case. But he doesn't have too much of a history to even attack. I mean, he's only been in the Senate, a year and a half or something. So it's not like he has this voting record. He is on record as far as his policy views and positions. And, of course, they're immediately attacking him on the abortion issue, which he's somewhat moderated, just like Mr. Trump has. He says, I think we ought to leave that issue to the states. So he and his running mate are aligned on that issue. But, man, the left is really going at him on that. And that seems to be what they're hanging their hat on from a policy perspective.
Well, it's really added a wrinkle to everything, and if there has ever been a more wrinkled presidential season than this one, I can't think of it. And it's going to be interesting to watch the rest of this week unfold. Of course, tonight you got Nikki Haley scheduled to speak. What are you expecting out of that?
Well, I think that's consistent with this sort of new environment and this new attempt to unify. Not only are we trying to unify the nation, we're trying to unify the party. And I'm not sure she would be here were it not for what happened on Saturday. I think that's just changed everybody's perspective in a good way, that this is ridiculous, and maybe we need to tone it down. Now, that should never be used as an excuse for any fool to go out and do what this Crooks character did. I'm certainly not justifying it on that basis, but I think when you've got a public pulpit the way these candidates do, probably makes sense. I'd like to see us get back to focusing on policy and debating policy and having civil discourse around policy. Mr. Trump would wipe the floor with Joe Biden in that arena. By the way, you saw Kamala has already extended an invitation to Senator Vance to do a debate. I look forward to that. I think we may see a debate among the vice presidential candidates and not see a second debate with the presidential candidates.
I think you're probably exactly right. Gerard Gibert live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You go get your bus, man. Go catch it.
Got it. Appreciate it, guys. Good talking to y'all.
Have a good trip. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you again soon, my friend.
Sounds good.